Hello and welcome to episode 198 of the Rollo and Slappy Show. Today is May 11th, 2020. I am Rollo McFlugel, and with me is Slappy Jones 2. Show notes page for this episode will be mcflugel.com/198. And I want to wish everyone a happy halving. We had the block subsidy halving for Bitcoin down to 6.25 per block, so that was a big day. Went beautifully. We did not have a mining death spiral as of yet, so all is good so far. So on that show notes page, check out our sponsor, libertymugs.com, where you can buy Bitcoin and libertarian-themed mugs and T-shirts and some other accoutrements. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Slappy Jones, and he's going to introduce our guest for this episode.
By the way, that's not a bait and switch that you can buy Bitcoin. It was Bitcoin, Bitcoin-themed mugs.
What did I say?
You said where you can buy Bitcoin and libertarian mugs?
Well, Bitcoin was the modifier of mugs, as was libertarian.
That's what I was clarifying.
Right.
So anyway, our guest today is Melissa. You can find Melissa at Small Crimes with a Z. She's a return guest. We had her, a return guest of Rollo's. I was not on that episode.
Who is we?
But we did because it was an episode I was looking forward to, and we were both talking about having Melissa on, and then I got temporarily fired. So Rollo and Mel talked about what was her name, Amber Geiger.
Yep.
And today we're going to talk about a more recent one. I think it's happened in February, but maybe some video came out recently on Ahmaud Arbery, and maybe not so much the specific. Well, we will talk about the specifics of what happened, but maybe pose some hypotheticals and how it would be handled in a free market, and maybe different ways the NAP is violated and what you can do in response to that, etc. So, welcome back to the show, Melissa.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Slappy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, give us a rundown of what happened here. I was saying before we went on, the last couple weeks, I just haven't been watching the news or following much at all. And this kind of, I guess, broke in the last week, or really got big in the last week. And so I've kind of been out of it. But I did a little bit of catching up, but just kind of fill us in on what happened, if you could.
Yeah. So back in February 23rd, it was like a Sunday afternoon. There was a black man jogging down the street. He was unarmed. He was confronted by two men, McMichael and Gregory McMichael. They chased him down, yelling, blocked him in. They were armed, and there was like a bit of a struggle, I guess, after they confronted him with the gun, and Arbery was shot and killed. It was just like mostly like some black activists and a couple of other people that talked about it for like 2 months, but it didn't really gain steam until a video was leaked of the killing, and that went viral, and then all these other details started coming out about the case, and now it's, national news.
Yeah, you were the one that kind of brought this up to my attention, and when you did, or at least when you said that there was a video of it, I went and searched it out and watched it. Do you want to because I remember my reaction was like, what did I just watch? Like, obviously I knew what happened, but it just it was weird. I don't even know how to explain it other than it's I don't know.
It's kind of chaotic. Just to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, you think maybe he's like this real bad guy because there's one car blocking him off. There's a man in a truck. There's a third man behind them recording. They're shouting, and there's a struggle. So it is a little hard to see what's going on in that video. But they show him, he gets shot, and I think there's 2 shots that were fired. during the struggle, and then he like stumbled forward a couple steps and then like falls to the ground in the video.
Yeah,
I really hate sharing those videos. They're so hard to watch, and I know they just ruin people's days. But I watched it.
Yeah, I was
It
just
was
about
awful.
to say I may not put it in the show notes just because it's you're watching someone die, and that's very unpleasant and nasty to say the least. But it's out there if you want to see it, and if you have the stomach for it. It's one of those things where it's like you said, it's not great to watch, but to kind of understand some of the things that happen in the world, that it might not be the worst thing to see. Yeah.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was all I was going to say.
I was going to say, with this story, there's some like shady, like wonky stuff going on with like the prosecutors. There was like the first prosecutor recused herself, but supposedly told them not to make an arrest. But now like both the police department and the district attorney's office, they're kind of like in this feud over whether that actually happened. And then there was like a second prosecutor, George or Gregory McMichael. He worked as an investigator, he was a retired investigator. He worked like 2 decades with the Brunswick Judicial Circuit District Attorney's Office. He had like deep ties to the police department. So the first lady, she recused herself. The second guy, he recused himself, and in the same letter, he's like, I am too, tied up with this guy, we're too close. But I think that there's no probable cause, or they had a cause to pursue him, or I guess, and do this citizen's arrest. They had firsthand probable cause of that arrest. And so I think that's a little weird. He recused himself, but also, that's why there was like 2 months without an arrest. And then they got this third guy in there who I think kicked it up to a grand jury, and now charges were pressed. They were arrested.
Oh, so it wasn't necessarily the fact that the video came out and there was public outcry that an arrest was made. It was just because kind of behind the scenes they were shuffling around who is going to, deal with this?
Well, the second prosecutor, he only recently recused himself because I think of the video, because they went so long without doing anything. There's also like this office, it just seems like a whole mess. They're the same office that prosecuted a woman she helped another woman with a voting machine, and they arrested her or they prosecuted her for felony voter fraud. The woman, DA Jackie Johnson, she's like, when she first came in, she was known for like trying not to make waves with the police department. And you can listen to Monica Perez's episode about the woman DA. She has a very interesting background.
Is that typical, or would you know if someone is shot and they didn't make an arrest right there while they had the shooter?
I'm not really sure. The 2 cases I've been on here for, they didn't immediately make an arrest.
I don't think it necessarily would be the case that you would.
Not necessarily, but.
I mean, to just give an easier example, if there's someone that breaks into your house in the middle of the night and you shoot them and he's in your house and he's got a mask on and a knife or something, then it's like, well, probably wouldn't arrest the homeowner who was in his house. Or at least wouldn't be
what I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
From what I remember with
different. Sorry.
It's okay. With the Amber Geiger case, I know like the commentators had said that it's typical for them to isolate the people. And I guess in this case, I would think that the dad and the brother would be separated to get their stories. I know there's like this big thing that Amber Geiger still had her phone. So I would think at the very least that they would detain them and talk to them, maybe. I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, they have this police report, so they obviously interviewed the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. You want to kind of gather information and figure out what happened without necessarily making an arrest. I mean, if in a situation where you have to shoot someone and kill someone in self-defense, I don't know that you would be against kind of giving a statement and trying to piece together what happened. It's just not. I mean, who knows? It's just not a good situation, and anyway, you cut that kind of thing. But there was a lot of stuff said about Ahmaud Arbery, about things that kind of led up to that altercation. You want to talk about that a little bit, about like what he was doing prior to that and why they would have engaged him the way they did? Because there has to be a reason that like a couple guys in a pickup truck just don't like drive up to someone and shoot them.
Yeah, so I guess in one of the 911 calls, the guy, it seems to be Jeff Gregory, I keep getting his name wrong, I'm sorry, Gregory McMichael, was in the front lawn of like his son's house. And on the call, he said that they saw a guy jogging down the street and that they had a problem with recent break-ins and that this guy had matched the description of those older crimes. There's like a lot of, I guess, it's not really clear, but I know for sure he was like looking around like a half-built house, like a construction site. Allegedly, there were a rash of burglaries or break-ins in the area. However, there hadn't been any for like 2 months before what had happened in February, the murder. And I know on January 1st, like a gun was stolen, and they said that person had matched his description.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I saw a couple people out there, and I didn't even really dig into who was all saying this. It looked like mostly clowns. But there's a video, like, wasn't there like surveillance video of him going into this construction for the new house or something?
Yeah, I think maybe just like right before, maybe like less than an hour before the shooting.
It didn't really show much, other than him just like walking in and just kind of looking around, and then the video stopped. And there are some people going around being like, "Oh, well, that's trespassing, and you're up to no good if you do that." And there are a lot of other people commenting like, "What do you mean? That's completely normal." And I even have a story about that. There's a couple of years ago, I was at a bachelor party up in the mountains, and as you do on bachelor parties in the mountains at night, you end up drinking a lot. And a couple of my friends went across the street to like a house that was being built, and they're just kind of like hanging out in it. And I went over, I think because I didn't know what they were doing or what was going on, and I don't remember if I went in the house or not. I don't think I did. I think because I couldn't see where I was going. I was worried I was going to trip and fall in a hole and never come out. But like, we're being mid-20s, idiots running around, and it was mostly harmless. And it was like, well, if someone saw my friends doing that, and it was trespassing. I mean, it's a violation of the non-aggression principle if you want to do that. But like, did they deserve to be tracked down and aggressively handled and shot? Given that we know the outcome of it, that they didn't do anything, they weren't over there to steal anything or cause any problems, and the obvious answer is no. But with that, I want to kind of talk about, kind of go back to first principles on this and kind of talk about this situation, because it brings up interesting points, and there's been some discussions around it. And even if most libertarians, and I think most people kind of get this, I think they can look at this and see that like, well, this guy didn't look like he really did anything, and he's dead. and these other guys kind of chased him down and killed him in the middle of the street. Like this looks egregious. This looks really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good opportunity, you know, to kind of go back to first principles and examine kind of, you know, the non-aggression principle, property rights, and how these situations should be handled. Unfortunately, we're doing this off the, you know, someone getting killed. So it's kind of a very somber, depressing way to do it. But I mean, it's a case study, and it's a real life situation, and so I think it's worth talking about. And unless anyone has any objections to this, I don't really care to talk about what the law is. I'd rather keep it to like the libertarian principles of property rights and everything, and non-aggression principle, and these first principles, because you know what, the government's law is stupid often, and it doesn't have any bearing on what actual ethics and morality are, as any libertarian should agree with. So if someone says, well, you know, law in Georgia says that you can do X, Y, Z, it's like, well, I don't care. It could be justified or it could not be, but it's kind of immaterial.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. I agree that like it doesn't matter what the law says in our framing, in our discussion, I guess. But there will be, or we talk about there being different rules and different laws, but when we say that, obviously voluntary opt-ins with, you know, homeowners associations or whatever, however society is developed, and they're going to have different laws, and some may be arbitrary and stupid, or customs or norms or whatever. But that's the case. So, you know, if the law in Georgia says like something insane, like you can just shoot someone who's running down the street, I mean, from a libertarian standpoint, we would say that's insane, that's stupid. But if you're looking at this specific example, you probably have to look at the law a little bit. But if we're going outside of that, then yeah, I mean, I'm fine with just saying, not talking about the specific law.
I'm talking about going outside of it and talking about actual ethics and saying like what was justified, what is
sure.
What can, because then it gets into all sorts of things, and I just don't know these local and state laws. So
I have no idea.
Yeah. So maybe the first thing we get into is like the McMichaels, the father and son, the guys that did the actual killing. First reaction was that, like, you know, these guys murdered this guy, and they're evil, awful people. And let's make it clear. I don't think these, the McMichaels killed Ahmaud Arbery. That is abundantly clear. There is no denying that, and I do believe that it was wrong that they did that. But I want to maybe get into this a little bit and just kind of break everything down. Let's just say that there was a situation where they heard that there's a break-in, and they had a rash of break-ins, and they decide that they want to kind of see what's going on. Do you have any thoughts about following? It's your neighborhood. If it's your neighborhood, you've got an incentive to make sure that it's kind of kept in good order. And even today, we see there's a lot of neighborhood watches. There's a lot of just people generally wanting to keep their neighborhoods safe and free of crime and everything. So what do you have? What are your thoughts on kind of engaging people that might be suspicious?
Well, with this
situation in mind.
With this situation in mind, he seemed to be wearing, shorts and t-shirt. Like, he didn't really, his hands were in plain view. You could probably see that. I don't understand why, like, just walking up to him, or even it seemed like they went about it in a very aggressive manner. I've had, cars pull up next to me and ask for directions. Even just doing that maybe wouldn't have triggered him to feel like that fright that he did when they, boxed him in and had like 3 people there and their guns out. It seemed like they were brandishing firearms or whatever. That's like part of it. I guess they could just like walk up to him, ask him what he's doing in the neighborhood. But he was running, so I don't know if they could keep up with him. To be honest, when it comes to solutions for this, I was a little bit at a loss what the right thing would have been to do. I saw some people say, follow, see where he lives, and then maybe call the investigator that was on that case. And that seemed like an okay solution.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a state with government police, and so we just kind of have to look in the dark abyss of reality and realize that there is no perfect solution.
Well, because I think this young black kid running with it seemed maybe a couple neighbors had called, and then 3 people who are all pumped up. If they're calling the cops, I would assume that the situation may have ended up just the same had they called the cops, but maybe sending an investigator to his house could have prevented that whole volatile situation.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree.
And in a free market society, if you called I guess there would be investigators for insurance purposes, so you could call them up and do the same thing.
Yeah. We will get to that topic, I think. but like one of the things, and you kind of mentioned it, was brandishing the guns around and everything. Is that if you're interested in, and we were talking about this before we started recording, but there was a time where I was hanging out at Slappy's parents' house with his brother, and his brother saw it was kind of later at night, dark out, and we thought we saw someone look in to my car kind of suspiciously, and so me and another guy went for a walk around the neighborhood and kind of saw the girl. It was a girl, so she probably wasn't going around breaking into cars, but whatever. And we walked up to her and kind of said, "Hey, is everything all right?" And I think we scared the crap out of her, and she said, "Yeah," and kind of scurried away, and that was it. Now, was that a good idea on our part? I don't know. I mean, it ended up okay. No one got hurt. She might have gotten a little bit nervous, but we were kind of trying to do our due diligence to keep the neighborhood safe and my property safe. But I think a major difference here is that, well, than the fact that it's like a girl we tracked down at night versus the middle of the day. But go ahead, Slappy.
No, I was going to say, throw a hypothetical at you. And I don't think this is what I'm not comparing this to what happened. But say you go up to that girl and then she pulls a gun out, and because 2 guys are coming, or say it was by yourself, I don't know. 2 guys are coming at her. She pulls a gun out, and for whatever reason you think she's going to shoot, so you charge her to try to get her gun. Then she does shoot. What is the libertarian response there? You have someone walking around at night. Someone approached her, scared her. She pulls her gun. You charge at her, and she shoots you.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that.
So now you only have one side of the story. Even if my brother was recording or whatever, it came out later or something. But there's only one side of the story to hear, and that's the guy who's alive. In this case, she controls the narrative, essentially. She can say whatever she wants. She could say, I was just walking down the street and this guy attacked me. I pulled my gun and he tried to punch me, or, so how do you, this is one of those things in this specific hypothetical we're talking about. It's hard to say anything about from an outsider standpoint.
Yeah.
It's a misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mel, do you have any?
And maybe that person was a little bit paranoid. Maybe you approach the wrong person. Most people, when they get approached, they go, oh, no, nothing, I'm fine, I'm walking. Or they might be like, this guy's creepy, I'm getting out of here. But sometimes you might approach the wrong person. And what do you do? Or what's the answer?
Right. Yeah, Melissa, do you have any thoughts on this?
Gosh.
It's a tough, I mean, and it doesn't have to be like trying to decide who's in the right and who's in the wrong, but just,
we don't know.
The looking at it holistically and being like, well, how do you want to even just, what are things you can maybe even do to not get yourself in this situation? Because that's kind of where I was leading into all of this, is like, you know, Slappy's brother and I, we walked in the neighborhood unarmed. We knew it was a girl. She, you know, knowing the area, you know, it was a very, very small chance that she was going to be armed. Not that we were even thinking of that. But, like, there's a difference between approaching someone, like you even said, with, you know, a car pulls up, asks for directions, as opposed to trying to block their path, holding a shotgun and standing in their way. I mean, it sends a very different signal. It
is, you know, like, I think it's important to remember, in the kind of society that we want, you know, like us, at least us three, actual crime's going to be significantly muted. I mean, Bitcoin fixes this. We're going to have, you know, crime is going to be significantly muted. And I would think that eventually we would get to a point where not everybody's going to be like, you know, so on edge like that. In this case, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I do think that, and this is where I think pacifism has some good answers to things. And I'm not a pacifist. Maybe I'm pacifist curious, or I don't know what the term would be. I like everything they say, and I think it kind of checks out. But it would be difficult for me to be a fully a pacifist, and it's one of those things. I think I've talked about before here that I would like to be proven wrong by pacifists and be able to fully embrace it. But you know, when you engage someone physically or violently, and say you're totally justified, and even going back to what Slappy was saying as a bit of a misunderstanding, or just let's use this example, the Ahmaud Arbery case, that the McMichaels fully, truly believe that this guy is probably someone who's up to no good, and they want to protect their neighborhood, and so they go out there with the intention of just trying to find out what's going on and maybe show some intimidation to get him to leave the neighborhood and not come out. And Ahmaud Arbery is just going for a run and maybe made a mistake of walking into a place he shouldn't have been, that made him look suspicious. Mm-hmm. And so they engage him, and all of a sudden we're in this situation where Arbery feels like his life is on his well-being, his life is under threat because there's a guy holding a gun in his way. So all of a sudden he feels justified. He's got a decision to make. It's the fight or flight thing, and he could run away, and maybe they would have shot him in the back. I don't know. But we'll assume that they wouldn't have. But he decides that he's going to, you know, try to grab the gun and protect himself. Not necessarily to inflict any harm on the McMichaels, but just try to, for his own survival.
Keep the barrel away from him.
Right. I mean, if someone stuck a gun in my face like that, or at least was holding it near me, I don't know what I would do.
I think it's hard for anybody to say that they would know what to do in that situation.
And you've got, and just this is all hypothetical. I'm assuming that the McMichaels had good intentions. I'm not saying that they did. I'm just saying that for this, we can do this thought experiment. We don't know for sure either way. They could have been could have been thinking that they were totally righteous in what they were doing. But now you've got a situation where it's completely rational and even justifiable for someone to grab the barrel just to not have it pointing at their chest.
Mm-hmm.
And that sends a signal to the other guy that, oh, now this guy's fighting me.
Trying to get my gun.
Right, which means that he's got to fight back. And so it's just this positive feedback loop of escalation where both parties feel that they're fully justified in what they're doing to protect themselves. Now all of a sudden, because the guy with the gun, the McMichael's coming up with the gun, is saying, all I'm doing is going up and asking him a question, seeing what's going on, and I've got the gun to protect myself because there's been property crimes over here. I don't know what's about to happen. I want to show him that I'm armed and that he can't try to take advantage of me. And meanwhile, the other guy is like, what's going on? All of a sudden I got a gun pulled on me and I didn't do anything. So both parties can feel fully and very rationally feel fully justified in engaging in the violence that they fully believe is. Both sides feel that it's self-defense.
Well,
and so it's like, and this is what you were saying earlier, Slappy, and using the example of me following that girl to see what she was doing with looking at my car. Both sides would feel that they're totally justified in what they're doing.
Well, I believe Greg McMichael was I could be wrong. Was Greg McMichael or Travis McMichael the one who shot?
I think it was the son.
Okay.
That's what I read right before we started recording.
Gotcha.
I'm still super confused which one. I know one was in the back of the truck, one was recording, and one did the shooting.
And one of them was a former police officer?
That was Greg McMichael.
Greg's dad, correct? Yeah, so yeah. I don't know, who knows? I mean, they were probably close, father and son. I don't know. One thing that hits me immediately is that's a former cop. His training kicks in, and it's to be aggressive. And like you said, cut him off, get out of your car, point a gun at him. When we talk about free market solutions, we've talked about the Detroit threat is that what they're called? Detroit threat management or something like that?
Yep.
Where they specialize in de-escalation and have never shot anyone or killed anyone, and that's kind of a market solution to security. So in a way, it could be that police training caused this to begin with. A guy acts like he's a tough guy and comes out with a gun and wants to be aggressive and control the situation or whatever they say, but someone fought back. And even if Ahmaud Arbery did something, what if he is the burglar or whatever he was doing in that house? I don't know. People say, and Rollo actually said earlier, that's normal. I don't know why people are going in these houses. I have no idea, but he didn't do anything in there. He didn't take anything. Certainly not worth a death sentence. Certainly not worth pulling a gun on the guy, in my opinion. Now, from the outside, you don't know what he's doing if they saw him in there. But I just think the Detroit threat management model of de-escalation and talking is certainly a better solution. Like, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to approach someone who you think may have just committed a crime, but to approach them aggressively, they might fight back. And that's you escalate the situation when you do that.
I would think for a young black man in Georgia to be running down the street and three white men, they block him, they essentially hunted him, block him in.
That's what it appeared. Now,
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but let's say he did nothing and he's out for a jog and that happens. Yeah, you're thinking something's going to go down. I mean, if I was running and a car cut me off and another one pulled up beside me and then a guy got out with a gun, I would think I'm dead. So I don't even know what I did. I'm out for a jog and I'm dead now.
in one of the 911 calls, the man's shouting. So it's, he's blocked in. He probably in the back of his head, he's like, I just stopped by there. Even if he did nothing wrong, it might have popped in his head like, oh gosh, they think I did something wrong.
Sure.
And then they're shouting and yelling. That's a really chaotic situation to just want to talk to somebody. He might, Lord knows what went through his head. That probably was like the worst thing to do in that situation.
Not exactly the same. I was driving, this was probably 2 years ago. I was driving for Uber and I picked up a passenger on a dark, there was nothing around. He was on a dark road with trees and he was wasted. He was really drunk, gets in the back of my car. And immediately I'm thinking, like, who is this guy and why is he here? Like, he wasn't outside a bar. He wasn't at a train station. He was on a middle of a road with no buildings. It was very weird. So I start taking him to where he's going. He wasn't going that far. And a cop did cut me off, because I had to pull over so he could puke out the side of my car. And a cop pulled over right in front of me, like it was going to, T-bone me. It was perpendicular to my car. A second car pulled up right next to me. They got their lights on. The guy gets out of his car quick. He didn't have a gun drawn. But I was scared. I was scared at that point. I was like, what the hell is going on? And I just put my hands on the wheel. I said, I'm just an Uber driver, and I didn't say anything more. Turns out that it wasn't the guy they were looking for, but it was scary as hell. And if they didn't have the flashing lights and it was I would think I'm getting robbed or something. And I don't know what I do then.
Another thing I thought about in this situation, do you guys remember the mass, well, I don't remember if it was a mass shooting or almost mass shooting at the Waffle House? That happened.
You'd have to.
It was a young black man wrestled the gun away from the shooter, and he was all over the country, hailed as a hero. I think about that situation too. It's two guys, they acted the exact same. One's a hero and one is
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything really wrong with his response trying to protect his life, though a lot of people see that as the sole justification is why these men shouldn't have been arrested.
Right.
Well, yeah. And I think even if, let's just say it was a total misunderstanding and somehow, you still killed someone, and that's still not behavior that is okay in society. There has to be some repercussion. You can't just kill people, even if you thought they were a bad guy or whatever. You escalated that situation. That's a real problem.
Yes, I agree. And I want to make it clear that someone died because of the actions of what the McMichaels did.
Stupid,
so they are culpable,
aggressive actions.
Yeah, they are culpable of what you do. If you draw a gun on someone and point it at them and eventually pull the trigger, that's on you. You are responsible for that trigger pull. You are responsible for shooting them. Then it goes into the details of whether or not you were justified. But when you piece all of it together, and when you could have done it in a way that didn't escalate the situation so much, it's on you. And when you make those decisions to go and engage people like that, what becomes of it, a lot of it's going to be on you. If that, going back to that example of your parents' neighborhood, when me and your brother went out to follow that girl, if something happened, it would have been on us. Because we were the ones that engaged. You
were
her.
Aggressively, yeah, right. Or not aggressive. You know what I mean? You were initiating the contact.
Mm-hmm. So it's that's why that's why I like libertarianism. That it's the idea that people are sovereign and own themselves and aren't the slaves to anybody else. And I think with that, you got to couple it with trying to resolve problems as peacefully as possible and avoiding violence unless absolutely necessary. And by violence, I also mean, that includes brandishing guns at people.
Yeah, and that's what a market would help with that, because what we have now is a monopoly on violence. Now, these guys were not cops, but when the cops do violent things, you have no alternative. Whereas I believe just about everyone. There can't be too many people who say, if they really thought about this, now maybe they're out there, that Greg and Travis handled this perfectly. A guy ended up dead. There's no way you can say a guy ended up dead who, as far as we know, didn't do anything. So they could not have possibly handled it well. And a market would help that. Whereas if they were cops, it's like, okay, either charge them or more likely don't charge them and move on to the next guy. Whereas if we were paying for security, we don't want our security forces killing people. It's not good for business.
It kind of reminds me of, like with the Amber Geiger trial and then with this one, where like the state's monopoly on it has kind of limited our imaginations with solutions. And with both cases, it took forever for the victims to actually get justice. And it would help if, like with abolitionist mechanisms or, whatever, if there's a swift response and it addresses all the, issues. And then also in a libertarian society or even a more freer society, I don't know if you guys listened to the We Are Libertarians episode where we talked about like community. If we would be better equipped to handle this if we were relying on ourselves more often, like getting to know our neighbors, the neighborhood watches, de-escalation, training, like first aid, all sorts of that stuff. You would probably have better tools to handle situations like this.
Yeah,
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And I think it's a good opportunity to start transitioning into how we think that a free market, a private society would handle situations like this better. And I think what you just said was all good things, but let's take it a step further, and I think that we wouldn't have, obviously in a free society, we wouldn't have socialized government police forces. We would have private police forces. So, do you think in a free society we'd have vigilantism like this? Well,
originally I did. The other day on Twitter, we had an exchange, and I guess in my head, that's what I thought. And you had said, I'm going to actually pull it up and read it.
I didn't mean that as to be like a...
No, it was super helpful. No, because even in the thread, I had said something that really kind of like, if I put two and two together, I would have come up with the same thing. I said vigilantism seems to be the flip side of pacifism, but an inevitable feature of a stateless society. And you said I would tend to think that we'd see less vigilantism in a stateless society because people would feel less inclined to take matters in their own hand because the private justice system would actually function well. And I thought that was a really good point. So a week ago, if you would have asked me, I would have said, absolutely, I think it would be prominent. But today it's more like, how about you take this one?
Well, it's the police are awful at their jobs. I mean, it's like, I'm not trying to pick on individual police officers or anything, but it's the nature of socialism, and that's what we have with the police. So they just don't do a good job of trying to, uphold property rights and protect people. And so there's a gap in their service. There's just, there's the line that when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. Not that a free society, private police would be able to, have teletransportation be a thing to get police there instantly, but even just a situation where it's like you need to call because I don't think that this case with Ahmaud Arbery was, seconds mattered. Clearly, I don't think that mattered. But just the idea that you can't. Well,
I think there'd likely be more preventive.
Yeah,
measures. Yeah.
Engaging with someone can be dangerous. And so, if Ahmaud Arbery was armed and The McMichaels didn't know that, and they had their gun, and he decided, oh, I feel my life is threatened, and justifiably so, and he pulled his gun out and shot him. It would have been a much different situation, but it just kind of shows the danger of engaging people. So you want to leave that to the experts. And the police aren't good experts. The police, as they are now, just aren't good experts at dealing with this stuff. We see what happens all the time. You call the police for situations, and they end up bungling it up, and people that shouldn't die end up dying. And there's a lot more violence than we need. But if we had... If we had a situation where you could call someone that was actually going to handle it well, I think people would be more inclined to do that. So it would be like just, if you had an issue with your toilet, and you didn't feel comfortable doing, whatever you had to try to do to figure out what was wrong, you call a plumber. Would you call a plumber if you thought the guy was a bumbling idiot and wasn't going to be able to solve the problem and probably going to make it even worse? No, you'd probably just try to figure it out yourself. And maybe you
unless you had to use that plumber because of your designated area.
Right. Yeah.
And that was the only plumber there. And you're like, I guess I got to call this idiot.
Right. So I think that, if you want a good resolution to your problem, because for the vast majority of people, no matter what happened, outside of circumstances where, like, your family just got murdered by someone, you probably don't want the outcome of a situation like this to be someone dying and dead. You want justice to be served. You want it to be figured out, whether or not the guy did something wrong or not. And hey, I think most people, if they're not sure of something would happen, I think they'd be happy to know that the guy wasn't doing anything wrong, or he just did something kind of silly or stupid and that he wasn't really a threat. I think they'd be happy to know that. So if you had actual professionals that could look at this situation and, adjudicate a good response to it, then people will be more willing and likely to use that service. As opposed to, also because they'd actually, they have more skin in the game, because there's also the fact that, you can just call the police for any stupid reason and they got to come. Well, whether or not they come. But.
Let's say this did happen. The basically same scenario happened with freed markets, right? So the security force was around, maybe they were monitoring that construction site and they saw someone break in, so they go. I know we would like to say, or we believe, that it wouldn't happen that way. They wouldn't cut them off and be aggressive and come out with guns. And I think we have reason to think that to be the case. But if they think this guy is a burglar, or I think it's okay to assume the guy has some sort of weapon on him. If you're going to go rob houses, there's a chance you might get confronted. So they come out with a gun and he approaches them. How do you think a market would handle that? So we don't have the state to prosecute. And let's say this was, Rallo's security force that rolled up and was way too aggressive. We would even say they acted completely unreasonable. What would happen? I mean, what would the consequence be? Because there's no jail or no state to prosecute them.
I think we'd have pretty well developed insurance markets that kind of dealt with this, and even just the neighborhood, whatever companies, whether it's just the Rollo. I mean, I think it could happen internally. If everyone's served by the Rollo insurance company in this neighborhood, including the one who got aggressively dealt with, there would be incentive for the company to internally investigate and deal with what happened. Because if the clients feel like that's going to be something that is a routine thing, then they're less likely to purchase insurance protection from that company, because they don't want to. You don't want to be on the end of their violence. Just like if you have auto insurance from someone, and you find out that this company constantly, rips people off or is really difficult with dealing with claims, then it's going to incentivize people to look for someone else.
So what do you think about this, either of you? Just basically personal responsibility as opposed now, like when a police officer nowadays, I believe this is the case, and Mel, correct me if I'm wrong, but if an officer, say that was a police officer who shot and killed that unarmed innocent guy, Ahmaud Arbery, he is protected because he is a police officer in some way, right? Rarely are they personally responsible. And you see this in other ways. Now, if any of us were to murder someone at work, we would be held personally responsible. But if we break any of the other laws, we can't, not any of them, but certain laws, you're kind of covered, you're protected because you're working on behalf of the corporation. So if I was at work and, I don't know, somehow I was negligent and messed up, I might lose my license. And I guess that in a way makes me personally responsible, but no, you couldn't sue me. You could sue the company that I represent. Partially, I think that's set up because companies typically have bigger pockets than employees, and attorneys run everything. So, you can go after the bigger pockets. But do you think that there would be arrangements like that in a free society where you're protected by being part of a corporation, like the police are protected? Or do you think they should be protected? Because would anyone take the job if you're held personally responsible for your mistakes? Could someone vouch for you? Would there be insurance there? Any thoughts?
Yeah, Mel, do you have I don't want to jump in if you have something.
Probably nothing.
Or have
really
you ever
great.
thought of it? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I would think that even if, they were backed by, like, something now that a lot of people wish for is that, police individual officers have personal, liability insurance. It could be something whereas, there's still a victim and there's still a victim's family, and that harm needs to be repaired, or we're going to end up with the exact same society. So the individual people who behave in that way, they would be more responsible. I don't know if they would just be somebody who's not hireable.
Yeah, no, I like that because they would have some kind of I would think they would have someone backing them, some insurance company, maybe backing them personally, who would judge their character, charge them an insurance premium. And if they did something so egregious as to kill someone, well, no one's going to cover them. And now you're going to be personally responsible for anything you do. So maybe if you make small mistakes relative to murder, your premium might go up because you're more of a liability. You're more of a wild card. But when you do something that heinous, that egregious as murder, especially an innocent person, but really any person, in my opinion, although, we could throw scenarios out there, but generally speaking, it's not a good outcome if someone dies. And that should prevent you from working, I think, or ever being in that situation.
Yeah, I don't think it would be that much different from what we have now. I mean, if someone comes to my house and slips on my front steps and breaks their arm, that's covered by my homeowner's insurance. And if my homeowner's insurance determines that, I created a dangerous situation, then my premiums go up. Whereas if I'm at work and I make a bad decision and someone gets hurt or something happens, then it's the company that does it. But then my company also has the ability to go and review what happened and say, well, this was your stupid decision and you just cost us a lot of money to deal with this situation. So guess what? You're fired. So I think there's already good mechanisms to deal with that. And I don't think we have to totally recreate society in order to deal with it.
Totally agree.
It would just be, you wouldn't have... I just don't think it would be that big of a deal to transition into something like that because I don't think we even needed the transition.
even if you looked at like corporations today, like McDonald's, for example, if they were, McDonald's police force, and their employees kept killing people, I mean, it might be financially okay, but after a while, people are not going to go there. So there would totally be incentive to not hire crappy people.
Right. I mean, what's the difference between if McDonald's had a police, just going with that example, it'd be funny, the McDonald's police.
It would be so funny.
If McDonald's had a police force that, incorrectly accused people of not paying for their meals and they went out and shot them versus an employee that didn't cook their hamburgers all the way or did something else that was stupid that caused harm to the customers, they just would get fired very, very quickly. And it would be a kind of a black mark on that employer or that employee that next time they want to get a job with someone else, it's going to be like, all right, well, let's get, give me some references from your previous employer. And the employer's going to say, well, this guy caused people to die. So it's going to be very difficult for you to get a job that has any sort of responsibility that could cause harm to people. So you're going to command a salary that's way less than you would otherwise. So the market has like beautiful mechanisms that exist to take care of these problems for people that can't handle things. And we talked about this before in an episode a while ago, Slappy, about how to deal with like a Bernie Madoff type person. People that have fraud and everything, that you don't want to like say that, oh, you can never work again and therefore you have to starve to death or that you're in prison forever. But, make it so that people can communicate these kind of things so that they can be well informed when they decide to hire you and not put themselves in a precarious position where you can cause them harm by your misdeeds. They're going to give you responsibilities that are pretty low, so that you if you mess up, you're not going to cause a lot of problems. And as you prove yourself worthy in the smaller things, that you can continue to build yourself up until you can redevelop your reputation. I mean, there's a parable in the Bible about the talents. It's the same thing. If you can be responsible in small matters, then you can be responsible in greater matters. So boom, even the Bible agrees with me.
I think like a big part of this, and pretty much every prominent shooting, whether it be, a vigilante one like this one or Trayvon Martin, and every police shooting, is like the response. There might not be a perfect, like I don't really know, what they should have done in that exact situation, but the response really matters, and that can go a long way to moving people, having trust in the system. They delayed so long on this one. The bad guys aren't ever held accountable. And I think in a system where people are held accountable swiftly and these harms are repaired, that's going to move us forward a lot too.
Yeah, it doesn't help when you have, it takes the veil to be pulled back and for everything to be seen, that everyone's scattering and running around like a chicken with their head cut off to try to fix the situation, as opposed to like, yeah, we were dealing with this. And, now that there's there's optics on it and people can see what's going on, it looks real bad when the light, it looks like cockroaches scattering when you shine a light in a dark room. You see these cockroaches running away, as opposed to just like, let me put it this way. I remember
Ralla's not living in the best conditions.
No, it's squalor and it's awfulness. But there was a at a previous job, I was there were a couple of us in in a coworker's office, just kind of goofing off, hanging out, and a high level manager walks in, and he kind of talks to us and just kind of hangs out too. And as he was leaving, he goes, the fact that you guys didn't like tense up and like all kind of run away when I went in the room, even though you were kind of like goofing off, means that you guys actually do work. Whereas where if I walked in, if everyone like stiffed up and walked out, it means that you guys are like scumbags. So it's the same kind of thing. And when it takes, videos and public outcry for people to actually like respond correctly, really kind of shows that that things aren't being taken care of internally, and there's probably a lot to be taken care of. But you just mentioned Trayvon Martin. I don't want to like derail this into another thing, but with all this stuff happening in the past year or so with shootings and man, it's been years since the Trayvon Martin killing happened, and I think I looked at the world a lot differently when all that was going down. But Mel, do you have any thoughts on how to perceive with that? Because at this point with Trayvon Martin, I've come to the conclusion, like, I just have no idea. Like,
did you watch that documentary?
Which one?
Maybe Tom Woods
Stephen
had the guy on. I didn't see the Stefan Molyneux one. I didn't see any of them, actually. I just heard about it. I heard the guy interviewed. I think it was on the Tom Woods show where I don't know. I don't want to derail this more because I didn't see it, but I thought maybe Mel would be familiar with it. The guy went and interviewed a bunch of people who were involved, and turns out one of the witnesses wasn't his girlfriend or was used. I don't know. It was very confusing to me. But I don't know if you are familiar with it or heard it. This is the Trayvon Martin case.
No, my conclusion right now is just I have no idea.
I have no idea. Yeah.
What to make of it.
Well, I think it's very similar to this situation. George Zimmerman, I honestly thought he would, go to jail. He was told by the cops. He called the cops and they told him not to pursue Trayvon Martin, and he did anyway,
right.
With a gun. A young kid being pursued by a man with a gun, felt threatened.
Sure.
Well, George Zimmerman couldn't take him. So, I mean, I don't know who attacked who first, but George Zimmerman was losing, so he shot and killed Trayvon Martin. It's very similar to this one. They pursued the guy and then got caught into this fight, and the guy ended up dying. So I think it's very similar in both cases. I think that I don't think that justice was appropriately served for Trayvon Martin. And I know in a lot of libertarian circles, that's not necessarily popular because of the whole stand your ground thing, but I'm not really sure how it can be stand your ground when the cops tell you not to pursue and you do it anyway.
Yeah,
it was very similar in this one, where the cops were like, is he committing a crime? They couldn't really say that he was doing anything wrong. They just kind of chased him down.
So weird.
Yeah. I mean, to play devil's advocate a little bit, if someone was, if I thought someone was messing around in my house, it would be difficult for me not to want to figure out what they were doing. And maybe that's a fault of me. But it's like, and I'm not disagreeing with you, because again, I still just have no idea. But I would err on the side of, someone died. Didn't really seem like they were doing that much, so something went screwy. But like, it's tough, and it's just a situation where it's, sometimes there's no good out. I mean, I can see both sides. Even when someone makes a mistake, that there's some we have to take into account enough nuance that, like, all right, the guy made a stupid decision, but wasn't necessarily out there to murder someone that day.
Right.
I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I don't know. He might have been. I don't know him at all. I don't know anything about him.
He might have been a total psycho. I mean, he seems to be. Why would you do that? But I also don't know. Like I wasn't there.
I would tend to agree with your analysis of that, Melissa.
I mean, all three.
Are you talking about George? Oh, okay. I was going to say
Trayvon Martin.
Zimmerman is absolutely a psycho. I don't know if you follow the news about him, but he's up to all sorts of shenanigans.
Yeah, he's a weird dude. But I didn't even want to. I'm trying to not include that in my analysis of, because you could be a psycho and still not be a murderer. But just the. I just know there was a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago now, but there was a dude that was broke into one of my parents' cars in the driveway in the middle of the night. My sister woke up because the cat was looking out the window, seeing what was going on. She woke up because of the cat and saw it and woke my dad up. And my dad was in the kitchen, looking out the kitchen window in the back of the driveway, looking at this kid in the car, stealing change and a GPS out of the car. And my dad was on the phone with 911, and my dad's like, I want to go out and get this kid. And they're like, please do not go outside. And my dad's like, I want to go out and get him. And, I think he would, this is a more clear-cut case where you see someone absolutely, without a doubt, stealing from you, or at least breaking into your property. I mean, he had the car. No one should have been in that car other than someone who was living in the house. My dad didn't go outside, and they ended up catching the kid and recovering a lot of the stuff he had stolen. But in that situation, if someone went out and defended their property, I think they would have been justified. Now, if it escalates, my parents didn't have any firearms on them, but say my dad grabs my baseball bat or something and goes out there just to try to scare the kid off, and the kid tries to grab the bat, and that triggers my dad to well, I got to swing at him. It's just bad situations, and ugh.
Well, look, this is why I like you two would be what do you say, pacifism curious? It's like, yeah. I really like that idea, and I try to handle things that way and approach with nonviolence at all times, because when you bring a gun, when you bring a bat, when you bring a knife, things can escalate and get out of hand. Even if you're justified, it can still have a loss of life, and if there's a better way to handle it, I think should be handled better. That being said, if someone was attacking me or my family, I wouldn't. I mean, I know I would step in. I know I would.
Yeah, that's. But and this was kind of. I'm glad that kind of reminded me what I was thinking about tossing these ideas in my head was that we have to understand that there's a difference between the justified action and the correct action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, yes, there might be some justification in the libertarian philosophies to use violence, but it's not necessarily always the correct action. And I think, Slappy, where you said, trying to find the peaceful solution, the nonviolent solution is the better way. And even I remember, I forget who said it, but there's some famous pacifist who's like, well, what if someone breaks into your house and they're threatening to kill you? Well, what do you do in that situation? You still could be a pacifist? What happened to that guy? And what he did was he acted crazy. He just started acting crazy. However he did it, I don't know if he started shouting and stuff, but he scared the intruder enough that he left. And so it's like, man, you got it.
Yeah. Well, just make it clear. I'm not saying, I have no idea, and I kind of think it wasn't, but I'm not saying that these three people involved in this killing were justified. We're just talking that in a libertarian standpoint, you could potentially be justified in murder and still not have handled it the right way. Or not the best way.
In Georgia, you can do there are laws that allow for a citizen's arrest, but they're super narrow. They have to see the person committing a felony or have direct knowledge of him committing a felony. Their reasoning was that he resembled somebody who...
That's absurd.
committed an older crime. So I think, and I like it says in the notes, the last burglary that occurred was 2 months before the murder. I think it would get really sticky if you start allowing just regular people to start.
It'd be absolutely insane.
Start doing citizens arrests based on, well, he looked
well, he
like...
was running, and he looked like someone.
He looked like somebody who committed a crime. So that's why I did it. I don't really know that the state would, and like looks like to what extent. That just seems like, very sticky situation.
Well, yeah. So it's like, even if the guy did believe it, it's still insane. Just like when cops always argue, I feared for my life. We don't know if they actually did or not. But if they did, it's still, if you look at the situation, it doesn't mean it was a justified killing. Like if I'm out for a jog and someone just says he looks like a guy who committed a crime 2 months ago and he's running down my street, let's go cut him off and shoot him or whatever, approach him with a gun. That's insane.
Right. There's a risk-reward thing you got to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why it's like if someone steals a paperclip from you, yes, they committed a property crime against you. But do you want to expend $5,000 worth of resources to get restitution from that guy? Probably not, because now you're out $5,000 minus the cost of a paperclip.
Right.
So that's the other thing you got to look at. Like, what is in the situation of Arbery, what is bringing a gun to a situation where there was just like some break-ins or that he was looking in a trespassed into a housing project, a construction project? Like, what is bringing a gun and engaging in him like that do? How does that help you? Like, what are you gaining out of that?
My guess is yeah, he's thinking he controls the situation. He points a gun, it gets the guy to stop, talk to him, but the guy didn't stop. He defended himself.
Right.
And so it's like you crossed the Rubicon. Now, because you created this situation, this is what happened. And you are in my opinion, you are responsible for that, for creating that situation.
Absolutely.
So, Mel, I know we're running up on time.
That's okay.
Can we put you on the spot for a free market success story?
Yes, I have a really good one.
Good.
Okay, so early March, I ordered a sewing machine online, and during the time that it said it was going to ship, it was kind of far out, but I assumed because of the virus, that's okay. I'll wait. Well, on the day it was supposed to arrive, they canceled the order. What? So then I looked online. Well, during that time, the price of sewing machines freaking tripled. So even used sewing machines on eBay are $500 for a $100 machine, or $1,000 for, everything just shot way up in price. And then anything decent at a normal store was out of stock because people just started going crazy to make PPE and stuff.
Were they using sewing machines as toilet paper?
Maybe. That's what it seems like. So I got on the app Let's Go, and there's one guy selling there. It's a little too pricey. I asked my aunt to check out on Facebook Marketplace, and she didn't see anybody. So I went to Craigslist, and there's a lady who is out of work. She owns a massage parlor, I think, and she was out of work, and she was selling one for $100, and it was new in box. So I was really excited. So I got the $100, went over there, bought it, came back. And I just thought I had so many alternatives to the big box store. And then I went to eBay, and then I went to, Amazon, and then it's none of those worked. So then I went to, a rummage sale type website, and it was really awesome. So I got my sewing machine, but then my aunt, she tipped it over and 2 pieces were lost. Another free market success story was finding replacement parts super easy online. So
nice. That's a great one.
2 for 1.
That's a great one.
Speaking of 2 for 1, I'm going to add a little bit of a free market success story because Childerberg is in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. Sorry, let me give the exact date so I don't mess this up. I always forget to mention Childerberg, but it will be May 22nd through the 25th, Memorial Day weekend. Jacob from Tasting Anarchy podcast, who we have had on a few times, he did a great job of when Emma Long Metropolitan Park told him that they would not allow camping during that weekend. He was able to find someone else that would do it, and so now it's being held at the Muleshul Bend Recreation Area. So if you're in the Philadelphia area and you want a tractor ride down to the Austin area for Childerberg, let me know, and you can have a hay ride down there. But Childerberg is still happening despite all of the COVID stuff that's going on. So that is a wonderful thing. I will be making
COVID's a wonderful thing.
Yes, I will be making fruit cake and doing our little fruit cake fun. Guess the weight of the fruit cake and do a 50-50 drawing if you get it right. So, it'll be a fun time. I'm sure because of everything that's going on, it won't be as not as many people will be able to attend as originally planned, but I think we'll still have a great time. So,
the true fans will attend.
Yes. Also, just a 3 for 1 deal. It was like maybe a month or so ago when I booked a flight when in the middle of all the COVID stuff, everyone was really like hunkered down and not doing anything, and I was able to, book a ridiculously cheap flight for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, supply and demand. Not many people demanding flights, and so I was able to take advantage of that. And I checked today, and prices are like 5 to 10 times what I'm paying for. Yeah, it's insane.
Do you want to know something really funny that I read today? And it's like so American. I think Carnival, maybe it was, they announced that they were going to open up in August, and their sales are like 600% above what they are usually.
Wow.
It's like these people were stranded in the ocean with freaking virus going crazy on the boat, and Americans are like, sweet deal.
Yeah, that's impressive.
Yeah, I thought like for sure that industry was dead, but nope.
Lightning doesn't strike in the same place twice, right?
Apparently.
So, where can people find you if they want to interact with you at all?
You can find me on Twitter at Small Crimes with a Z at the end. That's it.
Awesome. So
I guess I'm on Keybase, but I don't really know how you can find me there.
Okay. Yeah.
I've
dabbled in Keybase. Yeah. But we'll have that in the show notes page, mcfluga.com/198. And we'll also link to the episode that you were on previously. It was in the 140s or something. And also you were just on the We Are Libertarians podcast with Chris Spangle, and I listened to that today. It was excellent. So go listen to that once you finish up here. To maximize your Melissa content.
It's mostly about police.
Yes.
You can listen to it with your family. Well, wait, maybe actually I don't. Probably you could.
But you probably should.
I think you could.
Okay.
No, and
make sure your family is aware.
I think you did a good job in that episode. That's less of a maybe That podcast is less of an anarchist bent than we do. But you were able to present everything in a way that I was, not in my head going right on, and also having Chris not have a heart attack.
Yeah, I did want it to be like a cop rant.
Yeah. But it was very good. I highly recommend going and listening to that. So, once again, Mel, thanks for joining us, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be on again sometime in the near future. So thanks for listening to everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Bye.